Hello to the good people and to the bad. Bad people need love too.
When it comes to positivity, we all need it.
Write about people whose names are familiar to us now, like Isaiah Thomas.
Those things always work when it comes to putting out your best self.
God has blessed you with a beautiful voice, Chris. Thank you very much for doing this.
Hello to the good people and to the bad people, friends and enemies. And a hearty boom shakalaka to all of you out there. I am Chris Bass. This is CBI-Chris Bass Interviews. We congregate every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, and 2 p.m. Pacific time, always wanting you to be well where you are. Well, this is like a relaunch. You know, we've done CBI for a while. Had to step aside from the show, do some personal situations involving my family. But now I am back and trying to put the band back together again from a show perspective. And so I know we've been away for a little bit, but hopefully you can ingratiate yourselves and bring me back in. We're just family. You know how family is, you know, go away for a little bit, come back, all type of stuff and everything. But no alcoholism involved or no drugs. So it's definitely one of those situations where it's a reuniting and hopefully it should feel so good. My guest is someone I've admired for a long time. She is the owner of She Bops Productions, author, writer, also podcaster at Turi Ryder's She Said What, and a talk show host at WCPT Radio here in Chicago. It's been many moons since I talked to this fabulous young lady. And when I was up-and-coming lonely talk show host myself, I've always gravitated towards people who were different. It doesn't get any more different than my guest. I mean, as a compliment. Please welcome to CBI Chris Bass Interviews, the one, the only, the irreverent Turi Ryder. Turi, how you doing?
I'm well. I'm trying to get over the fact that you described me as a young lady. I'm at this point you could saw me in half and count the rings, but I'm grateful for that introduction. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Now, there's no particular order I'm doing this. So I was always intrigued by going over your bio I saw on social media. So She Bop Production. Now, before you tell me the name, the last time I heard something like that was back in the day with Cyndi Lauper. And Cyndi Lauper had a song called She Bop. We bop, he bop, I bop. This is not Hanson's Bop. Way before that was She Bop. So what was the origin story, the name of your production company?
Well, you almost have it right. I loved Cyndi. I still do. I think she's highly underrated as a
I agree.
songwriter and a talent and an advocate for causes, for women's causes, for equal access for everyone causes. She's a champion of people who look a little different and act a little different. But I just remember working in Top 40 radio, and every time that song came on, it made me happy. Just was a happy thing. And, you know, when you work in Top 40 radio, you can hear something. I mentioned this, I think, in my book, where the older jocks used to say, don't like any of the records you play, because by the time you've heard them 80,000 times, you'll hate them anyway. So just play stuff you didn't like to begin with. But Cyndi's stuff always stayed fresh. And so I was looking for a name for the company, and I thought it'd be fun. Plus, you know, we kind of bop. We don't take it too seriously, which is part of She Bops. And then there's that slightly blue interpretation of She Bops, and it's all fun. So there you go. You were right.
Oh, I'm happy I'm right, because like anything, and you're right. I mean, that's why I like your approach to things, because like you just say, you don't take it too seriously, and not to counterbalance with people who do take things very, very seriously and type of stuffy shirt type of thing. But I think that from my experiences working with people, the ones like yourself who didn't take it too seriously, those were the ones, to me, that are a little more progressive.
That's an interesting theory. I will say that there were people in talk radio. Now I'm talking about talk radio. There were
Sure.
people in talk radio whose political views I really found objectionable, but I loved listening to their shows because they were entertaining and they were fun. And then I'm thinking of one guy in particular started, as my girlfriend from Texas used to say, don't ever believe your own PR. He started to believe that he was this really, really, really important political guru, and then he took himself too seriously, and I couldn't stand listening anymore. So maybe I don't know if I can extrapolate from him to all conservatives, but no, I can't, because on the left there are also people who take themselves very seriously, and I think having a sense of humor about most things is useful. You'll live longer. That's my theory. This is radio. We make a difference. We can make a difference doing this. Um, I didn't used to think you could really make a difference doing this. You want to hear a story?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Yes.
my girlfriend Sam, I met in Portland during my short but first time as a talk show host. I was the morning drive host, and there were so few women. As a joke, I just called myself your morning man because there were no other women doing this in major markets.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't last long, but my girlfriend Sam decided she wanted to make me a going away party. And she said, there's just one thing. She's from Texas. I have to invite my manicurist. And I said, excuse me, your manicure, whatever. It's your party. You want to invite your dog, anybody. You invite anybody. You're the one making the party. And she said, well, good, because I have to invite my manicurist. Now, I don't even, if you could see me, I got married with no manicure. I've given up on all of that years ago. But so I knew we weren't going to talk about nails. But I met this woman at the party, and she came up to me and she said, I started my own business this year. I used to work in a big salon, but I rented a little space. It was going to be all mine. And I took a few of my clients, but I wasn't sure I'd make it, and all my money was in this little business, and I was so nervous every day that every morning I would get in my car to drive to work, and I would hear your show, and it would make me laugh. And if I have a good laugh, I can do just about anything. And so I really appreciate it. You got me through that first 6 months, and now I'm doing great. And at that moment, I thought, well, it's not brain surgery, but it actually can make a difference. So I carry that lesson with me from my first talk radio gig.
Well, again, so you just never know who's listening, and I marvel at that. As many years and many eons as like I've been in it and you've been in it, just never know who you touch, and the people who listen. There's a reason why they listen to you at that time, and so when you're able to connect, and you're just doing your show like anything else, but sometimes we realize that things happen for a reason, and so when they hear it and it touches them, or you're able to say it's life changing, it is very humbling.
Yes, it's good to do this work with some humility. You're right. It's good to have some on the other hand, and I know, nobody can sit in front of a microphone and expect that people will find us entertaining or interesting or illuminating or informative if we don't have some kind of ego. So I always think of air talent or any kind of performing talent. We're sort of like, do you know those Fabergé eggs? They're all bejeweled and they're really valuable and they're sought after and they're just exquisite and they're totally fragile. And that's kind of the performer ego, the radio ego. We're glittery and we're fancy and we demand attention and we're also very fragile.
Uh, you nailed everything. No, you got that right. So let's see. So were you born in Chicago? You're a Chicago person, right?
I consider Chicago home. I
Okay.
was born in Baltimore. My dad was
Ah,
in grad school there, and my mom was working, and so but they are escape from New York people. I come
okay.
from New York stock, and there are two kinds of ex-New Yorkers, I think, the ones who would crawl on broken glass to move back, and the ones who wouldn't go back if you paid them. So
That's right.
my parents are the latter, and they fell in love with Chicago. I fell in love with Chicago, and all the different places I've lived, I've always longed to spend time in Chicago. And when I'm here, are you originally from Chicago?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So then there's this ease of conversation that comes to you in Chicago where everybody will chat with you in the grocery store while you're pumping gas, or people are just genuinely helpful and kind here and friendly in a real way, not artificial, polite friendly, but genuinely curious about. I mean, for starters, we have a lot of people here who came here from other places, either in this generation or another generation.
Right.
So there's always a story that people have. I think people just sort of know that everyone has a story and we're interested in that story. That's my theory anyway.
No, it was a good theory. My mom is a retired school principal.
Ooh.
So the majority of people on my mom's side are educators.
Mm.
And so she would tell me the story about how my mom's family came in from Memphis
Mhm.
and the great, migration
Yes.
from the South. People standing on the train in the back, because, back in the day, colored people stayed in the back,
Yep.
and they stood all the way from Memphis all the way to Chicago on the train.
Wow.
It's amazing.
It
And
is.
so, yeah, and everybody has a story.
Yes, right. My family came to New York in what they called steerage, which was kind of
Mhm.
like standing on the back of the train to Memphis as you cross the
Right.
Atlantic Ocean. Same concept. We'll take you because we have to, but we'd rather not.
Yeah. And we benefited from that. So it's one of those things where you're right. Everybody has a story. It's genuine. It's not phony. And I've talked to people who worked in other markets and always said there's something about this city, Chicago, man. It's something that's real,
Yeah.
pretty much was genuine consensus.
Yes. Well, I know that in LA, where I spent a lot of years working in San Francisco, this was less true, but in LA, people would meet you and they'd find out you were on the radio, and then they wanted to know if you knew anybody in the movies or on television. Radio was not really an important medium there
Mhm.
then. But in Chicago, our celebrities, I mean, we had Oprah for TV and Phil Donahue for TV, but really our celebrities here were athletes and disc jockeys and
That's
talk
right.
show hosts. Those were the people who connected us. And we listened to the same stations, and you could talk about the things that the people on those stations were talking about. And there was a base for communication that was very real.
Absolutely. Go out to the comment section, the peanut gallery, as I call it. Let's see. Hello to Barbara Jean. Says, hey there, Professor Bass. How you doing? Thank you for being here. Also, what's up, Jed? Jed said, us out here in the audience appreciate the fragility involved in sharing the story. It helps us, helps so many.
Aw, it's nice.
Yeah. See, again, it's that connectability, that one-on-one that you and I have done as the host to the caller or to the listener or both, and then you just make it do what it do, as they say. What drew you? First of all, let me go back. So, you went to New Trier High School, as I read in your bio. What was high school life for you?
Miserable,
Ah,
completely miserable. Oh, with apologies to your fans who were in the
sure.
suburbs in the North Shore in particular. We had been in Kansas. I don't even ask. That you'll have to read the book. My
Sure.
father kind of, I guess now you might call it a depression. He took the family out of South Shore in the early 60s before things were in conflict there.
I
And
lived in South Shore. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
yes, so it wasn't that. It was his own depression. He left
Yes.
the university there and took us to Kansas. And I didn't know enough to like it or not like it. It was just where we lived. So
Mhm.
I acclimated, and then we came back to Chicago. But for some reason, my parents thought some of their friends had moved north and they were told they should live in this place. So it was the 70s. It was the North Shore. And it was and I'm just speaking for myself here. It was a complete culture shock and absolutely miserable. Everybody's marriage
Mm.
was falling apart. Half the mothers seemed to be on Valium. It was just awful. And we were university people. We weren't business people or economically advantaged. Yeah, I mean, my parents were okay, but we certainly didn't have the kind of money that most of the other people had. So I didn't shop where they shopped. I didn't do what they did. And then New Trier had, I don't make a secret out of this. I am a proud Jewish woman, and New Trier
Mhm.
was still, it was racist, and it was bigoted, and I had a
Mm.
teacher who used to single me out for being who I was, and I mean, I didn't get it nearly as bad as the few students of color who really it was just a misery. However, um, they had a radio station.
Mm.
Yeah, they had a radio station, and they had an alternative high school where people who were just ready to quit school altogether if you made us go to one more horrible class. So I went into the alternative high school where a lot of really interesting people were to be found, and I hung around at the radio station, not at that point so much because I was mad for radio, but because they had a really cute guy who was the chief engineer. So,
Mhm.
like so many things, that sexual interest, even when you're 16, 17, you're like, "Ooh, look at that cute guy. What is he? Oh, I'll get a show, and then he'll have to pay attention to me." And that's what I did. And then I fell in love with radio.
Yeah, see, my experience in high school was horrible to a degree. Uh, I was a knucklehead. I cut classes, and being a PK, not a preacher's kid, a principal's kid.
Oh, yeah.
So when they found out that I was a child of a principal, I had to go beyond A plus, whatever the hell that was. And I had to be super smart. I had to be like beyond Einstein, and it was undue pressure.
You
And I
had to
told the
set
story
an
before.
example. You had to set an example, Chris.
Oh,
We're
the
making
hell
an
with those
example
people.
of you.
They go back to hell because it
Yes.
just didn't make any sense. Like I'm in division, and Miss Truesdale. Once again, I don't know my own name until 12 noon Central Time, but I remember that heifer. So she found out in that first freshman class, going around the room, what your parents do for a living, and I told her in their class that my mom was a school principal.
Ooh.
Ah, I mean, her whole nose turned up and just, gave me like the now we call the side eye. And then I had her for English the following year, the sophomore year. And so you talk about being picked on. Yes, Christopher, turn to page 37 and make sure you go to breaking down the paragraph. I'm like, this heifer is on wheels. And so that type of pressure is undue. So I feel your pain from time to time. We talk about that whole thing about it being horrible, and it just was unnecessary. It really, we didn't need that.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the kids, who go into radio, young, the people probably the people and
Yes.
if the folks who are contributing to this stream also know people who went into radio beyond you and beyond me, there was this desire to be heard in a different way, and
Yes.
we could make pictures on the radio. We could invent ourselves. We could reinvent ourselves. It was a blank slate every day, and it was a gift.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And we didn't have a radio station, which I believe if we had that, because I love radio since I was 6 years old, I probably would have been out to be a different student. But yeah, I couldn't take it. But as I got older and realized what my major's going to be and what my life's going to be into radio, going to college and everything else, it took on a whole new trajectory shift. But yeah, those days, and I feel you because again, also not only Turi is a growing pains, but it shapes the beginning of who you're about to be.
That's true. I have a I don't know what it was about radio that first drew you, and probably your listeners already know this story, but I loved music more than radio. That was just where you got the music. But what was it about radio that made you wanna make it your life's work?
It was the music and listening to those old time radio programs.
Who were your favorites?
I would say The Saint with Vincent Price
Huh.
would be my favorite, and The Shadow would be another one of my favorites.
You're too young
And
to have heard them in the first iteration. Did you hear them on WBBM in the middle of the night or
I
Chuck
will listen to
Schumer's
them.
show
You are
or
correct. See, here's the thing. My mom being a principal, WBEZ used to be owned by the Chicago public
Board
school
of
system.
Education? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So I will listen to their weekday lineup throughout the week, and every night at around 7 or 8, I want to say 7, they would have a different radio show. I
Huh.
listened to each different, like Game Busters, the Green Hornet, the Lone Ranger, but the Shadow and the Saint really became my favorites over the years. So
Huh.
the sound effects, the voices, the imagination really drew me into it.
For me, it was the midnight special on WFMT, the classical
Yes.
station here, and I, of course, as a little girl, couldn't stay up till midnight, but they rebroadcast it every Wednesday afternoon, so I would sit under the dining room table and listen to it.
Very cool. I told us a little bit story before. So my grandparents, my grandfather in particular, saved money because as soon as, let's see, as soon as the 10 o'clock news went off at 10:30, he cut off all the lights in the house, and it'd be pitch black. I'm talking about black. So you can
Thrifty,
even
was he? Well, this was a thrift measure? Is that what this
oh,
was?
of course, yeah. No,
Okay,
he was cheap as hell.
yeah.
So you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face type of black. This is like deep, 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 damn near hell type black. So my grandfather would keep WBBM AM, the radio station, on sometimes.
Mhm.
And so at the time I had to spend a night over at my grandparents' house, at times they would play, of course, old time radio.
It did.
And then what made it so surreal is pitch black in the house. The program starts, and they have, of course, various programs. It would be my luck they play Lights Out. Now, what kind of hell crap is that? When you're a child and you hear Lights Out, everybody. I'm like, I'm pissing myself.
Well, I think that children were allowed to experience a little more in those days in some ways. People worried
Yes.
less about, is this going to damage our child? I don't think they worried about it quite so much. I know, which is why that I don't like to think of myself as a terrible parent, just an archaic, just an old school parent. I
Yes.
don't think there's that much I can do to screw them up, really. Really? I
Nah,
hope.
I don't think
Jury's
so.
still out, they're
Yeah, the jury's
not in jail yet, but it's never too late. So,
Jed types, what evil lurks in the hearts of men. That's right. That was the
oh, yeah,
shadow.
the
See?
shadow knows.
The
That's
shadow
right.
knows. That's right. Absolutely. So going back to this whole thing with you, so you said that drew you into radio. So you went to college. Where did you get your college education from?
I went to Boston, that they gave me lots of help, and I was out of there in 3 years, and then I had lied to the students. I There were a lot of students who had a lot of interesting life experiences, and I was kind of the scholarship kid with fewer life experiences. So I really blew up this idea of the high school radio station. I made it sound like a real radio station.
Mm.
Yeah, fluffed that up considerably. And then I thought, well, if I can lie about it convincingly, I can probably do it. So, so yeah, I applied all over to all these suburban stations, and I got an internship at a station in suburban Boston. And then I realized that really what I was supposed to be doing was being arm candy for the program director. I realized
Mm.
that in one record company dinner, and I managed to not get a ride home with this guy. I took public transit, and I thought, well, I've just blown through every opportunity to get an internship or an entry level job here. So I came back to Chicago. And I forget what your question was.
That's
It was like, how did it start? So yeah, that's how it started because I told really convincing lies and I convinced myself.
yeah, you
So
did.
yeah, there you go. If you believe you can, it's that whole I believe I can fly with apologies because he is now in disgrace, but still I believed that I could do those things. And
Yes, just pre yeah.
pre-scandal,
Yeah,
pre-revelation.
pre-scandal of R. Kelly, right. I
Yes.
went to I
Yes.
went to high school with him.
Did you?
I did, ironically. Yeah, he was never in class. I wonder why,
Yeah.
even back then.
Well, if only he'd let the young women grow up along with him so that they would be contemporaries. It just kind of that poor guy, he had a hard life. Hard
Stone
life.
cold genius. I mean, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember an interview that Ron Osley, the Osley brothers, had talked about, and he was asked who are the people you consider geniuses in the music industry. He said Stevie Wonder
Mm,
and R. Kelly.
interesting. I wouldn't put R. Kelly up there with Stevie Wonder, but because Stevie Wonder is sui generis. He is the only one. There's nothing even approaching that man, in my opinion. But
Mhm.
I will say that it's been a real revolution in the music industry his story, tragic for the young women. But I think we will look at these people more closely forever. And also, it's unfortunate, but these lessons keep getting handed out over and over again, that talent and moral character are not handed out in equal amounts at the same time. They
Oh
just
no.
don't go together, and it's really, it is unfortunate. We've learned that lesson over and over. So many talented people who are deeply, deeply flawed. And then we have this problem, like, what do we do with their art? What do we do with their creations? I mean,
Hmm.
we've had this since Wagner and Leni Riefenstahl and, horrible, horrible racists who wrote great literature. I mean, what do you do with their art? It's in my case, I've read a lot of art read a lot of literature that's got a lot of hateful content and of its time. I just have to kind of say, okay, this was the time in which it was written, and try and look at the art. And I still will appreciate Mr. Kelly's music. And that's a whole conversation about whether you take that stuff off the air or not.
Can you separate the artist from the art?
I don't know. Sometimes I feel one way about it, and sometimes I feel another. I think time is the thing that allows us. It's like when there's some national tragedy and a comic wants to make fun of it, and there's a time when it's too soon.
Hmm.
And I was just today, I was listening to where I swim at the public park near me.
Hmm.
They had on 70s and 80s kind of club music, and they had a Michael
Yes.
Jackson record on. And I thought, yeah, I think we're getting to the point now where we can just enjoy the music and not think about the tragedy of his life anymore. Um, that I don't know if there's a formula for that.
Yeah, I think time will tell down the road. Can we do that? And I think it depends on the person, like you said. When you listen to his earlier work about the Michael Jackson, yeah, you don't think about the tragedies that happened later on in his life, but the contribution that he has obviously put his DNA on will never be forgotten.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And so it's, I guess the thing that is important for everybody to assimilate in their core is you can do really horrible things and still make great art. And it's an individual decision whether that art then becomes too painful for you to read or see or listen to, or whether you can make an internal separation. And I think that also depends on the individual. I mean, if I had been, for example, a victim of the kind of abuse that the victims of R. Kelly endured, I think I'd feel different about listening to his
Mhm.
music. So some of that is just the individual in their own life story.
Very true. What was your first radio gig? Professional, that is.
Okay. All right. There was this little suburban radio station, WVVX. It was out of the same building in Highland Park that my orthodontist had an office. And I would get the job of turning on the radio station in the morning. It was a little daytimer, AM station, FM station.
Mhm.
They only could be on from sunrise to sunset. So in the summer, that was really early. In the winter,
Yes.
it was later. That if I was late, the radio station just didn't get turned on in time. And mostly what the radio station did was it did something called brokering their time, which
Hmm.
meant that if you had, for example, a ministry and you wanted to air your sermons, you could buy a half hour of time on this radio station, and we would get these big reels, pancake reels of tape, and we would play those. And so I was probably the first kid on my block to hear Jerry Falwell and the Focus on the Family person, I can't think of his name. And we did a lot of that, and a lot of foreign
Hmm.
language brokered time for see Spanish and German. There was a woman, but the morning show, they let me do the morning show live. And I think the reason was that the general manager of the radio station liked to trade time for a free trip to Disney World every year for himself and his family. So my theory was that he needed some place where he could put commercials that he could trade for a free trip to Disney World. I don't know
Right.
if that's true or not, but
No,
it
you're
was
probably right.
It was probably. It was an oldies format, but we had no records. We had, like, these 5 old scratchy, best of golden oldies, and I had to play those and do the weather, and I think I had, like, 2 listeners, and I was so desperate for more music to play that I started going to garage sales to buy more records on my I made, like, $3 an hour, but I was spending it to buy more music because I was going out of my mind, and then in the afternoon, I would go to the Evanston Y and teach swimming to old people. So, yeah, that was my first gig, and I got paid an extra hour a week for emptying the garbage cans in the station.
Look at you.
Yeah, I knew how to make the money there, but
Yes, good for you.
I told myself when I finished college that I wasn't gonna carry drinks or food around anymore. I had done that to pay for college. So I said, "That's it. No more waitressing for me." And I figured out how to do that.
Well, I can tell you're a survivor, innovator. You know, you take a situation, the classic making lemons out of lemonade type of person. So that's always a survival tactic. So for you, how many years were you involved in music radio before you made the switch to talk?
Ooh, I never counted them up. You can do the arithmetic here. I guess I
Oh,
s
please, my mom is a mathematician. I didn't get that gene.
Okay, well, let
So
me try and
so
figure this out.
okay, you know what?
Uh
Okay, go ahead, knock yourself out because I
About
can't count
maybe
to
maybe,
5.
like I okay, so I got my first gig, it would have been, like, 1979, 1980 was
Mhm.
music, and I switched to talk in '89. So there you
Okay,
go,
that's not
almost
bad.
20 years of music
Yeah.
radio. Yeah.
Why the switch?
Ooh, that's an easy one, actually. And you did well, you've done everything too, so you know how this goes. Um, it used to be, and I'm gonna see you nodding your head, I think, pretty soon. It used to be that if you were a DJ, you got to provide the entertainment between the records, and a lot of what went on the air, even if you didn't choose your own records, was up to you. You
Mhm.
could do a bit, or you could write a comedy routine, or you could create entertainment between the records,
Right.
and you were a real personality. And what happened to music radio was the records were the records, but the personality just started shrinking, shrinking, shrinking. And these radio stations, I believe, mistakenly believed that what they really needed to be doing was competing with people's CD players and cassette decks in their cars. And they missed the valuable point that what made radio special was the people. And so personality radio got to be rarer and rarer, and I remember working for KISS FM in Los Angeles, and this is the number 1 top 40 station, LA and New York. These are the 2 giant top 40 stations, and
Mhm.
at the station, and I'm not including myself in this group, but they have the best DJs in the world, really. They have they're brilliant, all these guys, and they start shutting them up. They start telling them to be quiet,
Mm.
quieter and quieter and quieter, and I remember being hauled into the program director's office and told, "Why do you have to be so funny? Why don't you just essentially shut up and play the records?" So,
Jeez.
I distinctly recall that they had and I guess the folks listening, you will know what a jingle is, right? It's the thing that goes, "Radio in your face," and then you
Mhm.
get right. Okay, so we got this new package of jingles and a memo, and the memo said, "The new music jingles are here." Before the singing begins, they had something called a 5-second bed where there was just music, where you could put in, the temperature, the time, whatever, and they had a script, and the memo said, "There's a 4-second script, read it verbatim and ad lib the remaining time."
Mhm.
Now, even if you aren't good at arithmetic, that's 1 second, and at that point, I just got so disgusted. I said, "That's enough. I can't do this anymore." I had one more chance at doing personality, music radio, and then that ended, and my girlfriend, who had always loved talk and been involved in talk, said, "You really need to do talk radio." And I said, "Well, it's boring." And she said, "What if it could be just like rock radio, but without the records?"
Mm.
And I said, "Okay, I could do that." And she said, "Well, I'd like to introduce you to a consultant who's putting together a station in Portland, Oregon." And there's a longer version of this in She Said What? A Life on the Air, but that's how it happened.
It when you're doing talk, to me, I knew I wanted to do talk when I was 19. I knew then when I was in college because to me it just seemed a lot more challenging. Not taking anything away from music radio because everybody wanted to be a jock. And when I was coming up in the 80s, everybody wanted to be the next Tom Joyner or the next, Doug Banks or anybody that's next up. And to me, yeah, but how many of those of us are going to be around to even get a gig being the so-called next up? So for me, when I first heard Ty Wansley, God rest his soul,
Oh my gosh, I haven't heard that name in years, but yeah.
when I first heard him, I knew exactly what I wanted to do at 19 years old. So over the years, I got a chance to meet Ty, became a good mentor and friend and big brother, and really helped lay down the groundwork. What I'm doing now, I was blessed to have him and Jay Marvin.
Jay
And
Marvin, oh
oh
gosh,
yeah,
we just lost him,
we
and
just lost him. Yes,
so
it's
sad. Yeah.
very sad. But again, I'm glad they were in our lives because they were just so dynamic what they did. So me at 19 and coming up behind them, and them, they didn't have to, but they put their arms around me and said, "Okay, I'm gonna help you out." And that just showed who they were as people. So going back to your situation, I'm falling in love with talk and it being challenging because again, yeah, I would be pissed if I'm doing music and all of a sudden the time I could do my talk part in the music or entertain is being limited to just nothing.
Yep.
They need a new challenge.
Yes. Well, I mean, you fell in love with some of the best talk hosts ever to put a microphone in front of their faces. Um, and then so of course you wanted to do that. I'm almost embarrassed to say this because I know some of them will listen to this, but talk radio when I was growing up was in this town, WGN, and it was kind of hokey in my opinion.
Yeah.
It was like
Well,
really, it was just I wasn't interested in it. It was like, and some pantyhose for your mom. It was just uh, we're gonna send you out to dinner at the Candlestick something, and I'm like, oh, it just wasn't for me. But the jocks had, like, almost mini talk shows. They were carrying on. I love WXRT. They talked about the music. They talked about the artists. I loved Top 40 radio. I've always had a secret love of bubblegum pop and early, Motown and soul. And they talked about the artists on those stations too. So,
mhm.
as for mentors, I wish I could say that I had people who gave me, like, a shot here and there, and that was all I needed, wanted, asked for. But wow, how lucky for you that you had Ty and Jay both. I didn't know about your connection to Ty.
Yeah, I produced both of them back at LS. When I got over to LS as a board op slash producer,
Mhm.
I got a chance to produce for both of them. And I'll say I was a crappy producer. I was not good.
No, you were not that's not true.
No,
That's
it's true. No,
no.
real. I'm not gonna sit here in front. I'm leaving revisionist history. I was so focused on trying to get on the other side of the glass. I could have been more focused as a producer. I did the bare minimum on my end, so I could have been much better. And anybody that knows me is like, well, they are in kind, but yeah, I could have been much better. But when you to me, because being on that side, okay, let's go to when did talk radio become cool for you? When you said about WGN, which someone told me once upon a time ago stood for "We Get Nauseous" and stuff like that. Uh, when did talk radio sound wise become cool for you?
Well, I'm gonna circle back to your mom who had public radio on. It was public radio, and,
Mhm.
I liked Terry Gross a lot.
Oh yeah, the best, one of
Um,
the best.
Fresh Air, if your viewer listeners haven't heard, she's the best there is, I think,
Yes.
as far as interviewing. She really reads the material and informs herself, and then she asks the questions that you didn't even know you wanted answered, and then
Mhm.
she lets the people answer. So I guess that was my intro to talk radio, which was long form interview radio.
Yes.
And then who else? Gosh, there must have been it just sort of again, for me, talk radio was like rock radio without the records. I could just John Landecker was probably one of the people who inspired me the most to wanna be entertaining, and Larry Lujak, and I worked with both of those guys. Lujak basically did a talk show. Stephen
He
Gary
did.
did a talk show with 4 records an hour. Those were talk shows. So, I guess this is a long answer, but now that I think about it, the people who
Mhm.
interested me in talk radio were Stephen Gary and Larry Lujak and, Terry Gross.
That's a good lineup.
It wasn't
Strong lineup.
bad. Well, they weren't easy. I mean, Steve and I have a pretty good relationship now, but I lived in fear of Steve and Gary when we worked at LS because half their material was making fun of the other people on the radio station.
Mhm.
But this is a story that almost nobody knows. I got hired in California because of Steve and Gary trying to pick me apart on the air. Um, they saw me coming down the hall, and they used to do a thing where they would find your old demo tape and play it and critique you, and
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
not
I heard
sure if
about that.
they'd found that, but they'd found me, and they called me into the studio, and they tried as only they can to pick me into little ribbons, and I am not easily pickable into little ribbons. I
No,
fight
you're
back.
not.
So,
Yes,
it
you do.
happened that the general manager of WKQX heard this and made a mental note, and when he was running as KFRC in California and had the chance to hire me, he did because of my tiny little experience. But here's an interesting thing about Steve and Gary that I thought was fascinating.
Mhm.
They did a lot of, um funny, very brutally funny stuff where you're like, "Oh my god, you don't only need a thick skin, you need a rain poncho and possibly a Quonset hut over your thick skin if you're gonna work around these guys." But,
Yes.
uh, the it was hard on the staff morale at that time, it was hard, and they left LS, and from what I heard, and I think that it's true, they the station where they next found themselves had an ingenious way of getting them not to destroy the morale of the other people on the air. They said, "Well, we're gonna give you a ratings bonus for your show, and we're gonna give you a ratings bonus for every other show that does well." So they
Impressive.
no longer had incentive to make other people's shows bomb because it wasn't cool to listen to them, and
Right.
yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just a little tweaking of the management style that makes people realize this really has to be a team effort. You can't just live on one successful show on your radio station. That's a really long answer, Chris.
No, but that's why I have you on here. You
For the really
you
long answers.
we'll take the really long answers, not a problem.
Okay,
You make my
you
job
got
a
it.
lot much easier, so it's no problem. I'll take all the time you want.
Okay.
So we met here in Chicago at WLS-FM, though. The slogan was WLS-FM Talks. When did you get that when did you get that phone call, or how'd you get that job?
Well, this I hate to keep saying this in the book, but I was at KSTP Minneapolis, and
Mhm.
I was doing afternoon drive, and then a very popular talk show host in the market came back, so they moved me to evenings, and stuff just kept getting moved around, and um, Drew Hayes, who was the program director for the station, called and said, "We're putting a talk station for women on the air in Chicago, and you're a woman, you're of Chicago, and would you be interested?" And what Drew didn't know, was that my contract was not gonna be renewed in Minneapolis, so it became like a race against the clock. Could I get a contract signed in Chicago before my time ran out in the Twin Cities? And I worked for a really great station owner, and I explained to her what was happening, and I said, can you just give me until this deal is done?" And she said, "Sure," because she's great.
Yeah.
And, that was how I came, be back home. I wanted to come back home. I really did. I loved Chicago and missed it. So that's how I got to be on, WLS-FM. And sadly, a lot of station owners and group owners don't understand that setting up a music format happens fast, but setting up a talk format is like turning a big one of those huge cruise ships. You can't just spin it around. It
Hmm.
takes a long time to bring that ship about and get it going in the right direction. So, because if you have a music station and you play 5 records, people hear those 5 records, they can kind of extrapolate from there what the rest of the station is probably gonna sound like. But
Correct.
talk, as you well know, is a personal connection between the host and the listeners. So, to expect that a new talk station would have that bond immediately is absurd. It takes about 3 years to launch a successful talk station, and most corporations are not gonna give a station that long, and they gave it 6 months, I believe, which was really a shame.
It was almost a year, pretty much, and we were left to fend for ourselves, and from what I was told from anybody else, and we pretty much were on our own at that point. Myself at the time being a producer, working with Johnny Vaughn at the
Oh
time.
gosh. Is he did he I w why
Yeah,
do
he
I
he
think
passed away too.
that's what I thought.
Yeah,
Yeah, I seem to remember reading that. There were a lot of people who were affiliated with that station who are no longer. There was a guy who did well, I guess he was with the AM and then he went to GN. A guy who was production director. I don't know, maybe there's something deeply physically toxic about talk radio and people who do it. I don't know, but here we are. So, yeah, I think Jay moved over to the AM, right? And the
right,
FM got shut down in 6 months. So,
exactly. Yeah,
there I was in Chicago just about to get married, and they noted that I had done a couple of shows about, the O.J. Simpson trial was going on.
yeah, I remember that.
So
Yes.
they made me stay and talk all OJ all the time, but I'm one of the few people who can say that O.J. Simpson paid for her wedding.
Look, that whole year, I remember because we had to air the whole trials daily. And
Yep,
so, as you know, because getting the lineup, Turi used to be on from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m.
yep.
Monday through Friday in the evenings. And so there were times when it ran into the evenings, these trials. So
Mhm.
there were times you came on late or Jay would come on later. So, everything was pushed down. So I tell the story real quick. So Johnny, God rest his soul, Johnny was all freewheeling. And sometimes Johnny would come in like 10 minutes before his shift started at 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. So Jay had to wait. And Jay was like, where, and I'm quoting Jay at the time, where the fuck is Vaughn? And I'm like, well, he's not here. Now, mind you, I'm used to Johnny coming in late. This is Jay's not, he's not used to it. I said, Jay, he comes in when he wants to, pretty much. When he gets in there, tell him to talk to him. I was like, all right, cool. So it's like 10:45 p.m. Here comes Johnny freewheeling. Hey, Roboto, that's dumb stuff he was talking about, whatever the hell. And I'm like, Jay wants to talk to you. So Jay reads him a new yes to the point where you ever see a father scolding his son? That's what it looked like.
Well, good, he
And
had that coming to him. You
oh
don't do that.
man, don't get me. I love Johnny, but Johnny just he cussed him out 6 ways to Sunday, and told him, I know nobody ain't told you this. You should get here at least 1 hour before your shift starts.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I learned
Right,
that yeah, I learned that lesson at US 99 actually, and I didn't that was not a talk station, so you didn't have to do the
right.
same kind of show preparation and production that you had to do for talk radio, but still,
Mhm.
the protocol is to be there for even for a music show at least a half an hour ahead, at
Yes.
least. And it was my first major market station and I didn't quite get it. So I would cruise in, 5 minutes before my show started, or sometimes during the news 5 minutes after. And I was a kid. I mean, I was really young. And I still remember the jock before me calling me Turi who makes us worry. And I got the message that that was not acceptable behavior. And I learned it pretty quickly that you don't give somebody an ulcer while they're waiting to see if you're gonna show up or not. You show up at a certain time so that they know that this is when even if it's just, 20 minutes ahead, as long as they know that they're gonna see you at that time. And so they know when they can start worrying if you're not there. I still when I'm at CPT,
Mhm.
I'm almost always there 50 minutes ahead of time, and half an hour to my mind is cutting it closer than I like. And one time they had dug up all the streets around the station. They were retarring, and it
Mm.
was like 20 of, and I'm literally a block away from the station, but I'm circling trying to figure out like where can I put the car. And I get a call and I said, "Yeah, I'm a block away. You could probably see my car out the studio window. I just can't find a place like Noah's Dove. I couldn't find a place to park." And I said, Is something going on?" He goes, "No, we're just used to seeing you an hour early. So if you're not here an hour early, we wonder if you're okay." And I'm glad that Jay taught Johnny a lesson, because there's a level of professional accountability that this is not a school carnival. You have to be professional about the work you do. And I learned that. I think I really learned that at LS from the jocks there. They worked so hard and they were so
Mm.
professional, and they made it look so easy. But Lou
Yes.
Jack would be in at I remember when he would be producing the Animal Stories albums,
Mhm.
and he'd be working till 11, 12 at night, and he had to get up at 3 in the morning. But if you and he would stay after the show, for hours reading, looking for stuff to talk about. They were all consummate professionals, and I learned just how much work goes into making it sound easy.
You're right, and we learn from that, and we realize that there's, like you said before about Lou Jack, it's that dedication that
Yep.
you have for the art form, that you have for the medium, and like you said, when you hit the microphone, you make it look so easy. It's the time off the mic, as we know, that you put the hard work in. So when people say, "Oh, I can do that," no, you can't. No, you can't.
Oh, yeah. You've just brought up one of my favorite things. This must happen to you, Chris. You go someplace, people find out what you do, and they say, I bet you could say this, that what do they say? "I'd like to be a talk show host. My
Oh,
friends all think I am" fill in the blank here. What do they say? "My friends all think I could do a talk show. I'm
and
so
I could do it. Yeah, yeah.
I'm so funny. I'm so fun." And I've started to lose patience for it. And I used to just nod and smile and say, "That's really lovely. You should try." But now I'm a little bit older and testier. And so people come up and they say, I had some very nice guy come up to me. He's a fancy dancy attorney, and he's telling me that he's doing voiceover work, and he thinks
Mhm.
that he, would rather be on the radio. And I just looked at him and said, I read stories about lawyers all the time, and I read about trials, and I have a lot of friends who are lawyers, but it would never occur to me to come up to you and say, let me take that case. Let me do that. I call it "I can fly the plane syndrome." It would be like saying, "Oh, I fly all the time for business and pleasure. I mean, what's to it? You go up, you come down, let me fly the plane." This is the kind of eh, and you see it in politics where people market themselves as, "I have no political experience. I'm a complete outsider. I know nothing about how Springfield works. I know nothing about how Washington works." And you're thinking to yourself, why is that a desirable quality? Why is your ignorance supposed to be appealing? Why is it that the mere idea that you want to do something, why is that supposed to translate into skill, talent, experience? As you can tell, I've had about enough of it. I've had a snootful of it. And I owed one person a favor not long ago, a friend of a friend, a very successful commodities broker, and he doesn't have to do anything anymore if he doesn't want to.
Mhm.
And he wanted to do voiceover work, the people who do the commercials,
Yes.
because everybody tells him he has such a nice voice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you get that all the time, Chris, right?
Yeah. You know what, Turi, if you would love to come back and we could just chop it up, because that's been on my nerve for eons. And the older I get, the cantankerous I get with that, because it gets on my last nerve. I had no more nerves. I had no more F's to give at that point.
Well, I'll
So,
tell you, when they do that, here's what I did. So you can
yes.
I picked a place where I thought I would like to try the pie, and I let him buy me a slice of pie. And then I explained that it's not just having a good voice, that it's actually acting, voiceover
Yes.
acting, and that all the people who do it put a lot of time into being really good at it. And then I sent him links to 5 or 6 other people whom I know well, who really do a lot of work and are brilliant at what they do, and each one of them can sound like 17 different people if they need
Mm.
to, or at least can act 17 different characters if they have to. And I said, "Take a listen to all these people and then see if you think that if you could do something like that." And that was the end of it.
I admire I admire that. I don't know if I would be so giving. Because I hear it literally all the time.
I owed the
Oh,
guy a favor. I owed my friend, he was a friend of a friend.
okay.
So I wouldn't have just done it out of the kindness of my heart. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
I'm not that nice, Chris. You're nicer.
Oh, no, who, me? Oh,
Yeah.
hell nope. No. I have my moments.
Well, feel free to
Especially
use
when
my
it comes
airplane. I fly all the time. I would never. I mean, what is it? Everybody thinks they can do. You go to the ballet and you see these people who leap 6 feet up in the air and land on one toe, and they make it look easy. But I don't know too many people who say, I could strap on those toe shoes and I could do that. But the hours of work that go into, Chris, to being a good producer, to being a good talk show host,
yeah.
nobody sees that part. And
No.
I know I sound just bitchy and grouchy and really, but have a little respect. Have a little
No,
res
you don't you sound great to me. That's music to my ears. So no, you preaching to the proverbial choir.
Oh, good.
So I got my church finger up. So no, you're saying everything correctly.
All
So
right then. Okay.
it is more than beautiful. Tell us about She Said What? A Life on the Air.
I will. I mean, how much time do we have?
Oh, look, I go overtime for you, but
Okay.
we buddies, so go right ahead.
Okay. I don't wanna take more of your time than you've got
No,
here.
no. Your time is my time. Please continue.
Thank you. So, how did I do this? Well, um, some of the stories that I've told you, I had told, um, but a friend of mine, the same person who said I should do talk radio, said,
Mhm.
"Well, you should write a book." And she said this to me for years. And finally, what happened was I started doing short features for CBS Radio Network, short humor features. I did
Mhm.
3 of them a week. They were called Turi Ryder's Exception to the Rule. And that got me in the habit of writing every week because I had to write. To write short is harder than writing long. These
Mm.
features each were 60 seconds,
Yes.
and they couldn't be any longer than that. So I
Right.
had to write a story that could unfold in 60 seconds that would give people something, a laugh, a smile, and I had to do 3 of those a week. And so that taught me that I could produce on a deadline. And so I thought, originally I thought, well, the book, I'll just sort of repurpose these. And then it went through a whole bunch of other iterations. And then I met a fancy New York agent and he danced me around for a while and then didn't do anything he said he was going to do. And I was just sort of carrying around this manuscript in my heart and head, and it was sitting on my desk. And there is a very successful celebrity photographer in this town. Her name is Linda Matlow. Her company is Pix International. She's sort of retired now, but
Mhm.
if you liked a picture of anyone who came through Chicago, chances are she took it. And she happens to be a good friend of mine. And she called me up and said, they're having a book, an author fair. I think it was Columbia College or maybe Roosevelt downtown South Loop. She said, why don't we just go over there and see what's happening?
Mhm.
And I said, all right, then let's go. And first we sat in a room of 20 somethings who all wanted to write their own version of Walking Dead. And I thought, And then I went down to the exhibit hall. Chicago has abundant small publishing houses. You may not know this, but there were a lot of small publishing houses here.
Did not know that. Okay.
And there was this guy in an army jacket. He's a veteran, so he's entitled to wear it. He had a table with some books that looked interesting.
Mhm.
And I got to chatting with him. And then I said, "But do you take manuscripts that aren't represented by literary agents?" And he said, "No, send me 50 pages." And I sent him the first 50 pages of the book, and he said, "I think I have an editor who would like to work on this." So that's how it came to be. It was kind of born of frustration and trial and error and redoing and pure chance. It's a sloppy story. It just
No.
goes in 16 directions. But ultimately, the lesson in that was writing is a discipline,
Yes, it
just
is.
like talk radio. The whole I'd kind of like to write a novel. You can just file that along with I'd kind of like to be a talk show host. Took years for this thing to happen.
Hmm.
And took a lot, years for me to find somebody who wanted to publish it. And I've really been grateful for the response. And it's going to be a one-woman show, and that's fun to work on. And it's just, you have to, if you're a creative person, Chris, you know this. And those who listen to your stream also know this. You have to create if you're a creative person. And if you can't do it in one place, you'll do it someplace else.
That's
So
true.
I wasn't doing a lot of, oh, I know there was one more contributing factor.
Sure.
I wanted to finish the book. Before the book was done, I really wanted to finish it. And I knew that I needed what I call a radio waitress job, like a
Hmm.
job where I didn't have to do a lot of creative, the kind of work that you have to do to have a successful talk show. And right about then, I got a call from a deeply, deeply creative but successful voiceover friend of mine. And he said, Bloomberg is looking for a production assistant, which normally is not the kind of thing that I would do. Normally, I handed stuff to production assistants all my life and said, make me a commercial, make me a promo announcement for the station out
Right.
of this. You do that. But I did what I often do. I said, well, I could do that. And so on his say so, they hired me part-time from home. I never met any of the people I worked with. I worked with them for 8 years. But I have to tell you, once again, I had lied to get the gig. Like I said, "Oh,
Sure.
sure, I can do that. No problem." For the first 2, 3 weeks, I was nearly in tears every day. It would take me like 12 hours to do the work. And my friend, the one who champions me, she said, "Well, right now you feel like you're taking 12 hours and they're paying you for 4. But pretty soon you're going to be able to get 4 hours work done in an hour and a half. And then you're going to feel like you're getting paid very well." And that's exactly what happened.
Hmm.
I ended up, and the beauty of it was I could travel, I could work on my book. I just owed them 20 hours a week. I could stack it all up at the beginning of the week. I could stack it up at the end of the week. And it was a gift, the radio waitress job. It was a total gift. I wasn't miserable. I didn't find it totally satisfying, but I wasn't miserable. And I got the book done. So there you go. Lying pays off. It's really hard to it's embarrassing to think about how much lying has worked in my favor.
That should be the name of your next book.
Lying
Your
works
lying
in your
pays off.
favor. Lying
Right.
pays off.
Right.
Yeah, you know what? May I write that down? You may get a credit for that, Chris.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I need the money. That's why I said lying pays off, right?
Lying
Well,
pays off.
so WCPT here in Chicago. So the connect that I got was a couple of years ago. Jonas Esposito, who does Afternoon Drive there on the talk station,
Yeah.
she would be on Facebook Live at the time.
Ah.
And so I would be doing my work here, getting ready for my show in the week. And then I would hear her. I had her in the background listening to her show from one point on Facebook Live and the various guests and I just, her as a host, I've been a fan ever since. From her days
Yes.
of anchoring on here local on Channel 5 and Channel 7 and then going to Into Talk. Not everybody, as you know, can do this, but
Right.
gifted, great observation skills, fantastic questioning when she's talking to her guests. I became a fan instantly. So then that stopped. And then about a while after that, I saw you advertising, for example, filling in for Joan. So how that connect for you becoming a fill-in host at WCPT started?
Well, actually, Joan was one reason. I have never met Joan, but I, like you, had seen her as a news anchor.
Mhm.
And I don't really think about news anchors very much. And to be perfectly candid and honest, and it's kind of embarrassing,
Sure.
I tend not to rate news anchors very highly. It's not, it's my own bias. I'm like, well, they're reading stuff that other people wrote for them. Big deal. What does it take to do that? And I stumbled across Joan's talk show on WCPT, and she won me over in a few minutes. And I thought,
Yes.
now here is a side of this woman that I've never heard. She's smart. She's got a great sense of humor. She asks good questions. She interviews interesting people. I became a fan, and I'd been off the air for a while at that point, but WCPT stands for Chicago's Progressive Talk. And I am a solid down the middle moderate Democrat. I'm progressive in some ways, but for the most part, I have to be pride. My kids call me a closet Republican just to upset me, but I'm not. But I squirm sometimes at the language and the what is asked of people sometimes. Like I sometimes am very uncomfortable with the things my party says and does, but I'm not voting with any other party, so there. So I called them up, the managers, and it took a while to get hold of them. And I said, you need a regular Democrat. You need a moderate, just a regular middle of the road Democrat. Not everybody can be left of center. Some people just have to be regular folks.
That's true.
And they said, you know what? You're right. We don't want to leave any Democrat behind. And so I started filling in. And sometimes I feel like I'm maybe a little too moderate, or the other day, I may actually have blown up my fill-in gig. I'm not sure I'm going to be filling in anymore, actually, but we'll find out. I was on the air last week, and I was talking about the Chicago Teachers Union president sending her kid to private school. I'm
Yes.
sure you've seen this story. I'm
Yes,
the
I have.
parent of public school graduates, public school students, and I'm a big union fan, and I got upset. I
Rightfully
was
so.
very upset. I really was, and so, um, I I I I was not nice. I was not friendly. I did not, and they asked me to please read her statement, and I already had, and then I had made fun of it. So we'll just see. We'll just see how that goes. But I called up my spouse after it was over, and I said, I may have just blown up my regular talk fill-in gig. And he said, this is, sometimes you realize why you love the people you love. He said,
Mhm.
he said, you've done it before. You'll probably do it again.
Right. They know you so well.
There you go. So
Yes.
that's how I got to WCPT. And if you never hear me again, that's how I left WCPT.
That's how you left WCPT,
There
right?
you go. And I don't know what they're going to do, but now you know more than most other people do. So
Turi, this has been more than fantastic. I got to have you back on, and I know how your schedule is. I think you will return to WCPT. You are definitely in my radio prayers, so you definitely. We'll see what happens, but this has been more than great. Last question that I have for you before I get you out of here: if you can invite 4 people to dinner, alive or not, who would they be and why?
oh my gosh. I sometimes think about this because sometimes these questions are asked, and you're going to think this is a cheating answer, but people who perform and create, sometimes it's better to just know their work. You don't want to sit down at dinner with them. I'm not going to say who this songwriter and singer and player is, but I'm sure you've had this experience where you hear an interview with someone whose work you adore, and then you wish they'd never opened their mouths.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I would have a hard time. I mean, who would that's a good I don't know, because the people I most enjoy spending time with are just regular folks, and then the people who are famous, I just want them to do good work, and I want to appreciate their work, and I want to just roll around in what they create, but I'm not so sure I wanna have dinner with them. I just
Well,
I
okay.
don't
Well,
know.
you can just name 4 people. It doesn't matter. I mean, the thing about it is like it's your call, it's your 4. So whoever you name, there you go. So just name people.
There's this woman at Columbia University who can teach you what your dog is saying to you. She would be interesting. I'd like to have dinner with her and my dog.
Okay, I like
Okay.
that. Okay,
Could
that's
you
cool.
explain what she means when she does this? So that would be one. I this is also kind of cheating, but there are people that I'd want to have dinner with just so I can give them a piece of my mind. Like,
Sure.
I don't really want to eat food with them. I just want to tell them what creeps and jerks and rottenness they really, you know what? And another thing you did. That would be it's probably not what you had in mind, is it?
Well, who would that be? I mean, if you didn't even a person that you really just,
Half the
cuss
guys
down
I've
up and
worked for half the guys I've worked for in my life. Although, and this is off your dinner topic, but I will
sure.
tell you something that happened because really the people I want to sit across the table from, I don't want to sit across the table from. I would really love it if someday, and if they read the book, I guess they'll figure out who they are. But
Mm,
there are people who really have treated people badly, or at the very least passed them over, for all kinds of reasons. Fear of doing something unusual, fear of hiring someone who doesn't look like them or believe like them or sound like
right.
them or come from where and what I really wish when I could if I could sit down in a room is explain, and that's partly why I wrote the book, um, is so that on the off chance that some of these people will pick it up and recognize themselves. Well, guess what? Somebody sort of did. And I got a really interesting message from somebody. And I don't know if he recognized himself, but he certainly recognized his type. Um, and he wrote to me and he expressed gratitude for the book. And he said about halfway through, he wished that he had hired me. And at the end of the book, he hadn't changed his mind. And then he wrote, "I'm sorry." And that's never
Mm,
happened to me before.
right.
Never. And this guy really he had, like, 4 chances to hire me, and he kept hiring the wrong people, and then he would
Mm.
ask me to come and fix the show by,
Oh,
being
okay.
on it or producing it or, it was clear that he wasn't really ready to turn over a microphone on his station to somebody who looks like me, sounds like me, acts like me. But later on in life, he's no longer in the business, he's retired, he figured out that probably wasn't wise, and I'd like to get a bunch of those guys at a table with a bunch of the people that they didn't hire, that they passed over, and I would just like them to be able to understand what they did to so many talented people, people of color, women, people they just never considered as possible hires, and I would like to have that conversation politely with them and without having to worry and without the other guests having to worry what they're gonna do to their career if they speak the truth.
Okay, so I'm only because it's you. I'm going to section the whole question off. So we talked about the lady who talks to dogs, communication with dogs, the programmer who apologized. So you have two other
But this is 2
components.
separate dinner parties. I don't want them at the same dinner party.
Well, again, only because it's you, they should be at the same dinner party because that'll be a damn good dinner party. Everybody in the same room, but you once again. You're not gonna name any names, so okay, that's cool.
I
So
can't. You finally stumped a talk show host. What can I tell you?
hey, look, these things happen. So I'm only because it's you. Again, I'm gonna let you go on with that. So you got two other compartments of a topic. So again, the lady who communicates with dogs, the
Yes.
programmer who forgives. So you got two more components here. So what would that be?
You really are gonna make it so
Yes.
I really love, art that's made by people with different abilities, mental, emotional, all of that, and I would really like to talk to, um, s the people who first figured out I don't even know who that was. I'd like to talk to the person who set up the folk art room at the Smithsonian with the giant room full of a whole city that some guy made because God told him to, and he made it out of silver gum wrappers in his garage. I'd like to
Mm,
talk to some of those artists, and I'd like to talk to the person who first recognized that this was a gift from the universe or the higher power or whatever you call it, this kind of inspiration. I don't even know the name of that person, but whoever figured out that that's really something worth seeing and conserving, the curator of the folk art wing at the Smithsonian. I wanna talk to her or to him or whoever the first one was. Does that get me off the hook?
Yeah, one more, then you're off the hook.
Oh, uh, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I'm just stuck. Because like again, like there are people, I'll just give you an example of why this is a hard question.
Sure, go right ahead.
You know Stan Freberg, how brilliant
Oh,
he was?
love Stan Freberg, yes.
Right. Well, I heard him speak once and it was not memorable.
Okay.
Right. But I loved his work. I mean, that's where the best of him showed up
Yes.
in his work. And I was sorry that I mean, he was older, so maybe that was the reason. But I
Yeah.
really loved. Do you remember Dick and Bert, the Dick Orkin and Bert Burtis, who did the
Oh,
Chicken
yeah.
Man?
Yes.
If I could turn back the clock and sit with them when they were doing all of that work, and Mr. Orkin's no longer living. We lost him a couple years
True.
ago, and I think Bert may have. I don't know if he's still around, but I think if I would like to have a dinner party with them in the 70s when they were doing that stuff. There, am
When
I
they're
off
in
the
their
hook now?
prime.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, well, and Dick Orkin then created something called the Radio Ranch,
Sure
where
did.
he did absolutely hilarious commercials, and I met
Oh
him
my God.
once. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Now, so no, and the whole thing about Stan Freberg, I mean, this is the guy who succeeded Jack Benny on radio
Yes.
and also did a lot of great parody work on his records with just, I mean, the man was lights out. I know how you talk about when you meet people, quote unquote, in real life and they're assholes and it's a horrible experience, but their body of work is just like lights out fantastic.
There you go. So even they don't even have to be jerks. They could just not sparkle and shine the way they do when they're
Right.
creating their stuff. Yeah. I
That is so true.
that is okay. Well, I'll tell you who the musician is. I admire Paul Simon very much. He's
Oh,
one of
sweet.
he's one of the few people I would just walk out and buy any record he makes. And some of them are, I mean, they range from gifted to breakthrough genius. And
Yes.
America writ large finally found out about the music of Africa thanks to Paul Simon bringing Ladysmith Black Mambazo over here. And I shouldn't say all of us, but many of us did not appreciate. And then more and more people from there he brought over here so we could
did.
hear it and appreciate it. And he was just a great, and they loved playing with him. He loved playing with them. And his body of work has meant so much to me. And whenever he gives an interview, I think, eh.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It's rare, again, you find someone who is the embodiment of excitement in both their professional and personal side. And sometimes just one or the other. So,
Yes. You
yeah,
know who are the worst? You know who are the worst interviews in the world? Don't ever interview an astronaut. I mean, think about it. They get paid to be totally calm when their spacecraft is on fire. So how
yeah.
exciting are they going to be on a radio show? They're nice, they're polite, but
Sure.
they're not gonna give you anything. It's just,
No.
that's my best illustration of how not everyone who has done something interesting is interesting.
No, very well said. Like I gotta be back on so we could compare talk host notes. And maybe that could be a new podcast or something like that, because I'm telling you, the horror stories really just chill my embers, to say the very least. Turi, this has been more than fantastic. More information about Turi Ryder. Where can they find you at?
You can find me. I'm on the socials. I'm on Facebook and X, although I keep saying I'm gonna quit because I'm so not fond of Mr. Musk. But I'm on Facebook, I'm on X, I'm on Instagram. Sometimes you can find my website, shesaidwhat.net. You just Google my name and the podcast. There's so many places. If you can spell my name, you can find a million ways to find me. So
You know, when I was putting the show together, and I told everybody I've been on a sabbatical from this program, I could not have picked a better person to restart this program than you, Turi Ryder. Thank you so much.
thank you. I had a great time.
Same here. Hang on, all right? I'm going to put you in the green room for a second. Be right there. Hang on, okay?
Sure.
All right. The great Turi Ryder joining me for the reboot and the reawakening of CBI-Chris based interviews. Of course, every Wednesday we get recalibrated every Wednesday. That's 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, and 2 p.m. Pacific time. And as you know, Baseline is now moved to Saturday mornings. So that's 8 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Central, and Pacific time is just way too damn early for 5 a.m. So the people on the West Coast, we do not want you to get up early. For me, please continue to lay in your bed and enjoy the slumber. I don't want you to do that. Please don't get up for me. My man, real quick, Real Wise TV, my man Base was up Wise. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for not always, but hell, thank you for being here for this inaugural voyage. Again, my thanks to Turi Ryder. And I would definitely appreciate if you can take this time to subscribe, like, and share this YouTube channel. Please go out and tell 5 of your friends and 8 of your enemies that Chris Base will be in the air. I'm telling you, I don't have any gifts for you, but just the pound on the back and the warm glow of victory. I guarantee it. Continue to be safe, continue to be sound, continue to be healthy, and most importantly, above anything else, continue to be loved. Long live the peace, long live the funk, and more power to you. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you Saturday.